I agree with the Manosphere regarding men's rights and some things they say about women. I think the Manosphere has a place on the internet, and I think they have a voice for men and a voice to share with other men and women who may agree with it. I understand the Manosphere have their perspective. I'm not into how they view women, but it doesn't really bother me because I'm just not interested in men like that. But I do understand that there are women who are interested in the men of the Manosphere. And I think that the women who would be interested in the men of the Manosphere, that the Manosphere has good enough information for them. I think women who have an issue with the Manosphere, that the Manosphere does not have good enough information for them, and they just shouldn't go to their content. I agree with the Manosphere about some things they say about women, such as like women not being able to work together. I think this is because of women who are very male identified, I guess they call it. I think women are just as intelligent as men, but there are women who are always being controlled by some man. I think maybe this is due to some subconscious fear due to men having more strength or a more aggressive nature. The problem with the Manosphere is they tend to talk about things they don't have a full understanding of. Their arguments aren't very well rounded, and it's a very one sided emotional rhetoric. They use a lot of deductive reasoning and come to very skimpy conclusions. They blame everything on women and modern society instead of looking at the situation from a 360 angle. They say like, oh, they're fighting back and it's a reactionary response. And it's like, no, you're not fighting back. Your movement is based in sexism. I'm just seeing a lot of aggression and complaining, not any sound arguments. Or they'll use trauma to explain their behavior. The thing with that is it's based on lived experience and therefore doesn't have to be supported by anything. It's very manipulative because they could just be acting that way to act that way for any other reason or no reason at all. And now you're just traumatizing other people and it's going both ways. And I don't think that people who do this behavior realize that they're doing all this, that they're being manipulative, and that this is not the best way to handle their problems. It's not random people's job to figure out what your problem is. When I go to female spaces, I don't see women antagonizing and obsessing over men like this. I've seen a few instances here and there, but I mean, what do you expect them to do? The level of slander and hate that the Manosphere has, I can see why the women would want to defend themselves. I mean, like, women aren't on that aggressive stuff. They're not. They take the most issue with female independence and feminism when really based on the arguments I've seen them make, they ought to align with these movements. So yeah, there is some contradictions in their message. Feminism is not incompatible with men's rights, and in fact it does advocate solutions to the issues that they bring up. So it's odd because they seem to support more traditional roles, but then complain about the issues that men have under that. But then they also complain about gender equality. So I'm not sure what their point is. I guess their point is that men have it bad either way and that they're more oppressed. The men's issues they talk about are like domestic violence, reproduction, family court, and the job market. With a lot of these issues, the problems are the very things that the Manosphere wishes to uphold and feminism seeks to dismantle. So a lot of the time I'm just confused because they complain about these things but want to uphold the same beliefs that led to them, just like these masculinity and femininity scripts. Like with domestic violence, how many people think it's benign for a woman to hit or throw a hissy fit at a man? I've seen it a lot where both men and women think a man should just be able to get over it. I don't think that's acceptable. I think men have a right to defend themselves. But a lot of these sort of issues revolves around social conditioning of this sort, where women are seen as weaker, harmless, and more vulnerable, and men are seen as stronger and that they should be able to handle it or get over it. With domestic violence, yes, more women are victims of domestic violence. It can vary by how much based on what type of abuse it is. But you know, in these arguments from the Manosphere, they point out that abused men have less resources, such as limited abuse shelters or being turned away from abuse shelters. And yeah, I don't think that many people would disagree that society is not good with dealing with abused men, but I think they understate why there are more resources for women. Their argument seems to be that male and female domestic partner abuse is the same and should be handled the same way. Even if it was at exactly the same rate, it doesn't take into account that abuse does not express itself the same way between the genders. Dangerous and life-threatening forms of abuse, such as being beat up or choked, are much, much more commonly experienced by women than it is by men. The other point brought up a lot is the unfair treatment of men in the labor market. This seems uncontroversial as most of the dangerous jobs are filled by men, and they make up the large majority of workplace fatalities. So because some working class men have laborious and dangerous jobs, they're less liberated than women who do not have these jobs. They have more choice, but that is not seen as a positive thing. Men's choices can be bad and may have negative outcomes. When it comes to women, though, choices are seen as good, regardless of the outcome, such as with reproductive rights. There's no consideration of the fact that women's obligation to take care of children might affect them negatively. Women are more likely to be single parents. Single parents are more likely to be poor. Women are more likely to be in poverty. Quality of life is not the only metric when discussing oppression. There are other areas that are just as important, such as who holds most of the political power, what laws are made, where does most of the money go, what social conditioning is in place, and what influence does all of this have. The Manosphere doesn't take into consideration any of this. It doesn't come down to women not wanting to take on dangerous jobs men have. Historically, they were barred from those positions, and they continue to face discrimination in male-dominated fields. Most of the people who died in World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, etc. were men, but this isn't because there just weren't any women who were willing to join the military. Women didn't have the choice nor the obligation to serve their country, and they were prevented to do so by a male-run government. And only in the last several years were women even able to enter combat. Furthermore, women don't enter the military under equitable conditions. Studies have shown that female presence is still a contentious issue. The Manosphere doesn't view choices as complicated things that can be positive or negative. All they care about is a conclusion that men are disadvantaged. Historical barring of women from service is a systematic oppression women faced. But per the Manosphere, having the option to join isn't liberating because serving in the military is hard.